Antoinette Calladito. On the night of April 5, 1986, in Gallup, New Mexico, a mother named Penny Calladito left her 3 daughters with a babysitter and went to a local bar. She returned around midnight, sent the babysitter home, and reportedly stayed up playing cards with her eldest daughter, Antoinette, until approximately 3 in the morning. At some point in the pre-dawn hours, a knock came at the door of their home at 204 Arnold Circle. What happened next comes from the account of Antoinette's younger sister, Wendy, who recalled the events 5 years later. Wendy said Antoinette asked who was at the door. A voice replied, "Uncle Joe." When Antoinette opened it, 2 men grabbed her. She kicked and screamed, yelling, "Let me go," as they forced her into a brown van. Another sister, Sadie, was uncertain whether a second knock had occurred. A neighbor reported seeing an older brown truck with New Mexico plates outside the home around 6:30 to 7 in the morning. Penny woke up around 7 to get the girls ready for Bible school and discovered Antoinette was gone. There were no signs of a struggle. The front and screen doors were unlocked. Penny searched the neighborhood for hours before notifying police around 11 that morning. Antoinette Christine Calladito had been born on Christmas Day, 1976. She was nicknamed Squirrel by her family. She was a student at Lincoln Elementary School, described as a bright and lively girl with brown hair, brown eyes, freckles, and pierced ears. She often wore a silver chain with a turquoise cross pendant. Her mother, Penny, was a waitress of the Navajo Nation. The household was described as chaotic, with visitors coming and going at all hours. Almost exactly 1 year later, on April 12, 1987, the Gallup Police Department received a frantic phone call. A young girl claimed to be Antoinette and said she was in Albuquerque. Then an angry male voice shouted in the background, "Who said you could use the phone?" Screaming and sounds of a struggle followed before the line went dead. The call lasted roughly 40 seconds, too short to trace. Penny listened to the recording repeatedly and stated, "It was her voice. I would know my baby's voice anywhere." Years later, more chilling details surfaced. In 1991, a waitress at a restaurant in Carson City, Nevada, encountered a teenage girl matching Antoinette's description seated with an unkempt couple. The girl repeatedly knocked her utensils to the floor, and each time the waitress bent down, the girl grabbed her hand and squeezed firmly. After the group left, the waitress found a napkin under the plate reading, "Help me and call the police." The sighting was never confirmed. Then came the most devastating twist of all. In a 1994 FBI interview, Penny Calladito herself offered a different version of events. She asked the agents, "What if me and Emo did this? Would we both go to prison?" She was referring to Emiliano Gardella, known as Emo, a man who had given Antoinette flowers 3 times in the days leading up to her disappearance, behavior investigators later interpreted as grooming. Penny stated that she and Emo had planned the abduction and that she knew who was coming to the door that night. Despite this, Penny was never charged. She failed a polygraph test. She passed away on April 18, 1999, at the age of 46 from liver and cardiac issues. The FBI had wanted to interview her on her deathbed, but arrived too late. The case has been investigated by the Gallup Police Department, the FBI, the New Mexico State Police, and the Navajo Nation Division of Public Safety. It was featured on Unsolved Mysteries in December of 1992, generating 120 calls. In April of 2020 and 2021, the FBI renewed appeals in both Navajo and English. The case remains open and active. Investigators believe Antoinette is likely deceased and that her mother facilitated the abduction, but no charges have ever been filed. A mother who may have opened the door for the men who took her daughter. A phone call too short to trace. And a napkin that read, "Help me." What happened to Antoinette Calladito after she was forced into that van? Antoinette's mother may have opened the door for the men who took her. But the next case involves a mother who thought she was helping her daughter cope, and instead placed her on a road where she would never be seen again. Bianca Piper. On the evening of March 10th, 2005, in Foley, Missouri, a mother named Shannon Tanner drove her daughter Bianca to McIntosh Hill Road, roughly 1 mile from their home. It was snowing. The temperature was dropping below freezing. Shannon stopped the car, and Bianca got out. The plan was for Bianca to walk home alone. It was a coping exercise recommended by Bianca's therapist to help her manage aggressive episodes. They had tried it once before successfully. This time, Bianca had asked to be dropped off farther from home than the first attempt. Shannon watched her begin walking, then drove away. Bianca was last seen walking along the road around 6 to 6:15 in the evening. She never made it home. Shannon reported her missing at 8:20 that night. Bianca Noel Piper was born December 26, 1991, in Foley, Missouri. She was a student at Winfield Middle School enrolled in special education classes. She had been diagnosed with severe ADHD and bipolar disorder, conditions that required daily medications to prevent disorientation and hallucinations. Without her medication, she could become confused and unable to find her way, even in familiar surroundings. The therapeutic exercise her mother was following had been specifically designed to help Bianca build confidence and manage her episodes of aggression. The therapist believed controlled exposure to independence would help. On the night she vanished, she was wearing a lime green blouse, a gray Adidas hoodie, blue jeans, and white sneakers, and she carried a flashlight. She had taken her medication that day. Her family life was complicated. Her parents, Shannon and David Piper, a truck driver, had divorced in 1993. Shannon's live-in boyfriend was Jim Felt. Bianca had 2 older sisters, Tiffany and Amber. David Piper passed away in 2009. In a tragic separate development, Bianca's sister Tiffany was later sentenced in September of 2014 to 8 years in prison for trafficking 2 high school students. An extensive search covered a 270-mile radius and found no trace of Bianca. No body, no clothing, no belongings, nothing. The complete absence of any physical evidence led investigators to conclude she was likely taken rather than lost to the elements. Shannon Tanner and boyfriend Jim Felt both passed polygraph tests. No family members are considered suspects. In January of 2007, when kidnapped victims Sean Hornbeck and Ben Ownby were found in the home of convicted offender Michael J. Devlin in Missouri, a task force investigated Devlin's possible connection to Bianca's case. A Lincoln County detective believed Devlin had been monitoring their search. But the task force was dissolved in October of 2007 with no evidence linking Devlin to her disappearance. In February of 2023, a septic tank near the location where Bianca was last seen was drained and searched. Othram Labs was engaged to analyze evidence using advanced forensic genealogy techniques. Then on September 12, 2025, marking the 20th anniversary, the Lincoln County Sheriff's Office launched a comprehensive new investigation. Chief Deputy Wade O'Haron stated, "Back in 2005, there was some physical evidence that was tested back then, and here in the recent past. We resubmitted that evidence with the advancements in forensics to see if we could obtain any further information. A dedicated cold case unit had been created in 2021, with Bianca's disappearance as its top priority. Bianca Piper was dropped off on a snowy road in rural Missouri as part of a therapeutic exercise. She carried a flashlight. She had walked the route before, and somewhere between that drop-off point and her home, roughly 1 mile away, she vanished completely. No footprints in the snow led anywhere. No vehicle was reported in the area. No witnesses came forward at the time. 20 years later, investigators are still testing evidence and still hoping forensic science has caught up to whatever happened on McIntosh Hill Road that night. Did someone take Bianca from that road? Was someone watching and waiting? Or did something happen that has simply never left a trace? Bianca vanished from a road 1 mile from home. But the next case involves a child who disappeared from her own front yard in broad daylight. And the people closest to her may hold the answer. Myra Lewis. On the morning of March 1st, 2014, in Camden, Mississippi, a young girl named Myra Rena Lewis was playing outside with her older sister in the front yard of their home on Mount Pilgrim Road. It was a Saturday morning, between 10:30 and 11. The family also had a newborn in the house, just 1 month old. Myra's mother, Erica Lewis, told the girls to go inside because she was leaving to go shopping. She assumed both girls would follow instructions and head indoors. Myra's father, Gregory, was inside the house tending to the newborn. According to Gregory, he did not notice Myra was missing for 4 to 5 hours. He said he assumed she was outside playing or at her grandmother's house next door. By the time anyone actually started looking for her, the afternoon was already fading and critical hours had been lost. Myra Rena Lewis was born November 30th, 2011. She had black hair, brown eyes, and was last seen wearing white or khaki pants, a kiosk, turquoise sweater with a bear on the front, and pink tennis shoes. Her grandmother lived next door and described her as smart and very obedient, not the kind of child who would wander off on her own. When the search began, Gregory used the family's untrained dogs and a side-by-side ATV to look for Myra in the surrounding area. But the investigation quickly raised more questions about the people inside the house than about anyone outside of it. In a February 2025 podcast appearance, Madison County Sheriff Randy Tucker revealed critical details that had not been widely reported. A police tracking dog was brought to the property and refused to leave the immediate area of the yard where Myra had been playing, suggesting she never walked away from the home on her own. That single detail changed the entire direction of the investigation. If the dog could not pick up a trail leading away from the yard, it meant Myra did not leave the property on foot. A cadaver dog was also brought in. It alerted to the back end of the family's side-by-side ATV, the same vehicle Gregory claimed to have used while searching for Myra after she was reported missing. Sheriff Tucker described Gregory as completely emotionless when officers arrived at the scene, sitting on the couch in a tank top playing a video game while his daughter was unaccounted for. The family gave conflicting statements about basic facts: whether Myra had attended school the day before, what she was wearing, and the timeline of the morning. Eventually, the Lewis family abandoned the home entirely and left the area, cutting off all contact with investigators. Sheriff Tucker stated publicly, "I firmly believe to this very date that the people that were on that property that day know exactly what happened, know exactly where Myra is." The case is Mississippi's longest-standing unsolved Amber Alert. The FBI maintains a $20,000 reward for information leading to Myra's recovery. On March 2nd, 2026, the FBI renewed its appeal on the 12th anniversary of her disappearance. No one has been formally charged. No one has been arrested. The investigation remains open, but has produced no actionable leads since the family left the area. A tracking dog that would not leave the yard. A cadaver dog that alerted on the family's own vehicle. A father who did not notice his daughter was missing for nearly 5 hours. And a family that packed up and abandoned the community entirely, cutting off all communication with the people trying to find their daughter. The sheriff says the answers are with the people who were on that property. If that is true, then Myra Lewis did not vanish at the hands of a stranger. She vanished in her own front yard, in broad daylight, surrounded by the people who were supposed to keep her safe. What are they not saying? The people closest to Myra may know what happened. But the next case involves a child who walked out her front door on the night before her birthday and was seen speaking to a stranger in black before she vanished forever. Sofia Juarez. On the evening of February 4th, 2003, in Kennewick, Washington, Sofia Lucerno Juarez walked out the front door of her family's home on the 100 block of East 15th Avenue. It was the night before her birthday. Her grandmother's boyfriend, Jose Lopez Torres, was heading to a nearby convenience store and had asked the children if they wanted to come along. Sofia initially said no, but then changed her mind. Torres left without realizing she was trying to follow him. Sofia asked her mother Maria for $1, had her white sneakers tied, received a hug, and walked outside. Torres arrived at the store, made a phone call to relatives in Mexico, and returned home around 9:45 that evening. That is when the family realized Sofia had never arrived at the store. Video surveillance confirmed Torres's account of his movements. He was cleared. But a neighbor, a young boy, reported seeing Sofia walk down her driveway and speak to a man wearing all black. After that, nobody saw her again. Sofia had dark hair, brown eyes, a mole under her left eye, pierced ears, and was missing her 4 upper front teeth. She was wearing a red long-sleeved shirt, blue overalls, violet socks, and white Converse sneakers, but no coat, despite temperatures near 36 degrees that night. She was 1 day away from her birthday. Police arrived within 3 minutes of the 9:53 call. Washington State's first ever Amber Alert was issued for Sofia. The response was immediate and massive. Over 500 police officers, FBI agents, and volunteers participated in the search using night vision equipment, thermal imaging cameras, patrol boats on the Columbia River, cadaver dogs, and systematic door-to-door canvassing across the entire neighborhood and surrounding blocks. Every home within a wide radius was visited. The case file has grown to exceed 20,000 pages. Over 800 tips have been investigated over the years. More than 150 registered offenders living in the area at the time were researched, interviewed, and cleared one by one. In June of 2021, police released a suspect description that had not previously been made public. A Hispanic juvenile male, estimated to be between 11 and 14 years old, who was seen laughing as Sofia cried while leading her toward a van. That description, held for nearly 2 decades, suggested authorities believed another young person may have been involved in luring Sofia away from her home. In March of 2021, a viral TikTok video generated worldwide attention and briefly raised hopes that Sofia might be found. A young woman in Culiacan, Mexico, bore a striking resemblance to Sofia's age-progressed photographs and publicly claimed she had been taken as a child. The video amassed roughly 2 million views within days and was shared across news outlets around the world. Kennewick police took the lead, immediately engaging Mexican law enforcement, U.S. Border Patrol, and arranging for DNA testing to be conducted. The investigation took months. In 2022, results confirmed the woman was not Sophia. For Sophia's family, the brief hope made the outcome even more painful. A dedicated investigator named Al Wiener, a retired Richland police captain, has worked the case since 2019 and remains assigned as of February 2026. Tips still come in at a rate of about one per week, more than any other cold case in Kennewick's history. Sophia's mother, Maria Juarez, passed away on January 10, 2009, in Sacramento, at the age of 26, from medical complications. She never learned what happened to her daughter. Sophia walked out of her house to follow someone to a convenience store on the night before her birthday. She spoke to a man in black, and then she was gone. The first Amber Alert in Washington state history was issued for her. It has never been resolved. Who was the man in black? And who was the young person seen laughing while Sophia cried? Sophia was seen with a stranger in black and then vanished. But the next case left behind something far more disturbing than an empty street. It left a bedroom soaked in blood, a pair of eyeglasses mailed to the house 8 days later, and a mother who failed every polygraph she was given. Lee Aki. On the morning of August 27, 1992, in Tupelo, Mississippi, a mother named Vicki Felton left for work around 8 in the morning. It was the first time she had ever left her daughter Lee home alone. Vicki's workplace was just 1.5 miles away. Shortly after arriving, she learned that remnants of Hurricane Andrew were approaching Tupelo. She called home. No answer. She called again. Still nothing. She raced back to the house. What she found inside was a scene that would haunt investigators for more than 3 decades. The garage door was open. Blood was smeared on a wall. Lee's bedroom was soaked in blood. Pools of it covered the upstairs floor. Blood trailed down the hallway, through the bathroom, across the walls and carpet, and toward the back door. Hair was stuck to a door frame. Lee's nightgown, bloodied, was found in the laundry hamper. Her undergarments with blood were in the bedroom, both items that had been on her body when Vicki left, suggesting something terrible had occurred. There were no signs of forced entry. Missing from the home were Lee's glasses, shoes, some clothing, and a sleeping bag. Lee Maureen Oki was born August 21, 1979, in Honolulu, Hawaii. She had blonde hair, hazel eyes, a strawberry birthmark at the base of her skull, and a lazy left eye. Her parents, Donald Oki and Vicki Felton, were both U.S. Army members who met in California, married in 1977, and divorced in 1981. Vicki had remarried a man named Barney Yarborough, but they separated approximately 2 weeks before Lee vanished. 8 days after the disappearance, on September 9th, a package arrived at the house on Honey Locust Drive. Inside were Lee's eyeglasses. The package was addressed to B. Yarborough, the stepfather, and postmarked from Boonville, Mississippi, roughly 30 miles to the north. There was no ransom note inside. No message of any kind. No fingerprints that could be matched. FBI testing determined the stamps had been adhered with water rather than saliva, meaning whoever sealed the envelope deliberately avoided leaving DNA behind. Someone had taken the time to package a missing girl's glasses, address the envelope to her stepfather by initial, drive or mail them from a town 30 miles away, and leave absolutely no trace of themselves in the process. It was methodical. It was intentional. And it has never been explained. The investigation focused on several individuals, Vicky Felton failed all 3 polygraph examinations, 1 administered by local police and 2 by the FBI. She remains a person of interest, though she has consistently disputed any involvement. Stepfather Barney Yarbrough was ruled out with a substantiated alibi and passed his polygraph. A 3rd person of interest was Oscar McKinley Kearns, known as Mike, a Sunday school teacher at Lee's church. 9 months after Lee disappeared, Kearns kidnapped and assaulted a teenage girl. He later kidnapped an adult couple and harmed the wife. Despite this pattern, he was never interviewed about Lee's case. He passed away in May of 2021. On October 14, 2024, a Lee County chancellor signed an order declaring Lee legally deceased at her parents' joint petition. Then, on January 29, 2025, the Mississippi Bureau of Investigation Cold Case Unit, Tupelo Police, and FBI conducted a major search near Lee's former home. K-9 dogs were deployed. A backhoe removed rocks from a drainage ditch. Mississippi State University anthropology students participated. The MBI stated that investigators remain committed to following all leads. Reports indicate that investigators still believe Lee's remains may be on the property. A bedroom covered in blood. A pair of glasses mailed from 30 miles away with no explanation. A mother who failed every polygraph. A Sunday school teacher with a documented history of targeting young people who was never questioned. And now, more than 30 years later, investigators are digging near the house where it all started, because they believe the answer may have been there the entire time. What happened inside that house on Honey Locust Drive in the hours between 8 in the morning and when Vicky came home? If you've made it this far and enjoyed deep dives into the most shocking criminal cases, hit that subscribe button and don't forget to press the bell icon. Lee's glasses were mailed back to her family, and nobody knows by whom. But the next case involves a girl who was lured by a classified ad, a phantom babysitting job, and a ransom call that referenced buttered topping. Margaret Ellen Fox. In the weeks before she vanished, Margaret Ellen Fox and her cousin Lynn Parks placed a classified ad in a local newspaper offering babysitting services. They were looking for summer work in Burlington City, New Jersey. A man calling himself John Marshall responded to the ad. He told Margaret he had a 5-year-old son, a backyard pool, and a swing set at his home in nearby Mount Holly. He offered her $40 for 4 hours of babysitting daily, a generous sum for 1974. He postponed their initial meetings multiple times, keeping her waiting. The phone number he provided traced to a public phone booth at an A&P supermarket in Lumberton, New Jersey. He said his wife would meet Margaret at the bus stop in a red Volkswagen. None of it was real. There was no son. There was no pool. There was no John Marshall. It was a trap. Margaret Ellen Fox was born February 4th, 1960. She was the only girl among 6 children, with 5 brothers ranging from 11 to 22. She was known as Maggie to her family. She had brown hair, blue eyes, freckles, and wore hexagonal eyeglasses with gold wire frames. She stood around 5'2" and weighed about 105 pounds. She was a student in Burlington City, Burlington County, New Jersey. On the morning of June 24, 1974, Margaret left a note for her parents detailing exactly where she was going. At 8:40 in the morning, she boarded a bus from Burlington to Mount Holly. Witnesses reported seeing her near Mill and High Streets after she got off the bus. After that, nobody saw Margaret Ellen Fox again. She had walked straight into a carefully constructed lure, built over weeks by someone who had studied her responses, delayed meetings to build trust, and chosen a public phone booth to remain untraceable. Hours after Margaret was reported missing, a man called the Fox residence. He demanded $10,000 for her return. The recorded portion of the call contained a line that has haunted investigators for over 50 years. $10,000 might be a lot of bread, but your daughter's life is the buttered topping. 4 days later, a second call reiterated the demand. Then, a ransom note arrived. It stated that Margaret was okay, that we only tore her blouse and broke her glasses, and was signed so long again with the letters S, L, and A. I capitalized. Some investigators suspected a connection to the Symbionese Liberation Army, the group responsible for the Patty Hearst kidnapping that same year. FBI fingerprint analysis recovered prints from the ransom note, but they matched no one in federal databases. In a devastating blow to the investigation, the fingerprint evidence has since gone missing. One of the most critical forensic clues in the case no longer exists. The loss has never been publicly explained. On June 24, 2019, the 45th anniversary of Margaret's disappearance, the FBI announced a $25,000 reward and publicly released the enhanced audio of the ransom call for the first time. After nearly half a century of silence, the public could finally hear the voice of the man who called the Fox family that night. The FBI hoped someone would recognize the voice, the phrasing, or the unusual buttered topping expression. In 2022, Burlington Police Chief John Fine confirmed the department and FBI were pursuing some leads. Margaret's DNA is in CODIS and is periodically compared against unidentified remains across the country. John Marshall was never identified. The phone booth, the fake babysitting job, the postponed meetings, the red Volkswagen that never showed up. It was all designed to isolate a young person and draw her to a location where no one would be watching. Margaret left a note telling her parents exactly where she was going. She did everything right. And she walked into a trap that someone had spent weeks building. The man who called himself John Marshall is still unnamed. The ransom caller's voice is now public. And the fingerprints that might have solved this case disappeared from an evidence locker. Who was John Marshall, and where is Margaret Ellen Fox? Margaret was lured by a fake job listing. But the next case involves a girl who vanished from a crowded holiday party. And the man convicted of taking her was caught not by witnesses, but by microscopic fibers on his clothing. Melissa Brannon. On the evening of December 3rd, 1989, a Christmas party was being held at the clubhouse of the Woodside Apartments in Lorton, Fairfax County, Virginia. Somewhere between 80 and 200 residents attended. Melissa Lee Brannon was there with her mother Tammy, who was 27 and worked as an accountant. Around 10 in the evening, Tammy and Melissa were preparing to leave. Melissa asked to go back inside for potato chips. She walked back into the clubhouse. She never returned. The only physical clue found that night was an open window in a utility closet at the back of the room. Melissa Lee Brannon was born April 13th, 1984. She had brown hair and blue eyes. She was wearing a blue Big Bird sweater from JCPenney, a red plaid skirt, and a coat with rare rabbit fur when she disappeared. Those specific items of clothing would become the most important evidence in the case. Suspicion immediately fell on Caleb Daniel Hughes, a groundskeeper at the apartment complex who had only worked there for 2 to 3 weeks. Multiple women at the party reported that he had made crude propositions throughout the evening. He gave unusual attention to several young people at the gathering, including Melissa. He left the party around the time she vanished. When police arrived at his home, they found his entire outfit from the party already in the washing machine, including shoes with the soles partially cut off and a sheath for a large knife. His wife, Carol, tracked mileage on their vehicle and noted Hughes had driven over 50 extra miles that night beyond what his story accounted for. His alibi for the late hours, stopping to buy beer at a store past midnight, was impossible under Virginia's alcohol sale laws at the time. The FBI's fiber analysis proved decisive and became a landmark in forensic science. Blue fibers recovered from Hughes's car matched Melissa's JCPenney Big Bird sweater. The sweater was made with a rare patented shade called Plum Navy 887, a color exclusive to JCPenney that was not used by any other manufacturer in the country. Red fibers matched her plaid skirt. Rabbit hairs matched the rare fur from Tammy's coat, fur that would have transferred to Melissa when her mother held her at the party. Each fiber told the same story. Melissa had been inside that car. The fiber evidence placed her in Hughes's vehicle beyond any reasonable doubt. When confronted with the forensic results, Hughes responded with just 2 words: "Prove it." On March 8, 1991, a Fairfax Circuit Court jury convicted Hughes of abduction with intent to defile. He received 50 years in prison. The conviction survived a dramatic appeals process. A 3-judge panel reversed it in 1993. But the full Virginia Court of Appeals restored it in a 5-4 decision in 1994. Charges related to Melissa's presumed fate were never filed because Virginia law requires identifying the specific location, and Melissa was never found. Hughes was released on August 2, 2019, after serving 29 years with good behavior credits. He moved to Rocky Mount, Virginia. He told co-workers he was a veteran whose wife had died of cancer. He offered to babysit their children, including a young girl. On May 31, 2024, he was rearrested for violating conditions of his registration by having contact with minors. His new release date is 2039. Melissa Lee Brannon vanished from a crowded holiday party in front of nearly 200 people, and not a single person saw her leave. The man convicted of taking her was caught by microscopic fibers invisible to the naked eye. Blue threads from a Big Bird sweater, red threads from a plaid skirt, rabbit hairs from her mother's coat. The science proved she was in his car, but the science could not tell investigators where he took her afterward. Melissa has never been found, alive or otherwise. Fairfax County Police consider it an active unsolved case. Hughes is back behind bars, but Melissa is still missing. Where did he drive those 50 extra miles that night? Hughes was caught by fibers, but Melissa was never found. The next case unfolded in the same Cleveland neighborhoods where 3 other women were held captive for years, and investigators initially hoped the cases were connected. They were not. Ashley Summers. In the summer of 2007, Ashley Nicole Summers was staying with her grandmother on Cleveland's west side. She had been having difficulties at home, skipping school and clashing with her mother, Jennifer. Jennifer had sent her to live with her grandmother for the summer, hoping the change of environment would help. Ashley frequently moved between various relatives' homes, staying a few nights here, a few nights there. It was a pattern that made her vulnerable, because when she stopped showing up, nobody noticed for 2 days. Ashley Nicole Summers was born June 16, 1993, in Cleveland, Ohio. She had brown hair, blue eyes, and had recently gotten a tattoo reading Jean, her boyfriend's name, on her upper right arm. She was reported missing on July 11, 2007. Police classified her as a runaway. That classification would prove devastating. It meant fewer resources, less urgency, and a case that sat in a file rather than commanding an active investigation. On the day she vanished, Ashley attended a pool party at the home of her great-uncle Kevin Donathan on West 96th Street. During the party, Ashley and Donathan got into an argument. He grabbed her cell phone and broke it, leaving her unable to contact anyone. After swimming, Ashley told relatives she was walking to her Aunt Christina's house, a 10-minute walk away. She took all her clothes with her. She never arrived at Christina's. Because she moved between homes so often, her absence was not flagged for 2 full days. The case took on new urgency in 2013. The FBI had long speculated that Ashley's disappearance might be connected to Amanda Berry and Gina De Jesus, 2 young women who had vanished from the same West Side Cleveland neighborhoods years earlier. When Ariel Castro's captives were rescued on May 6, 2013, immediate speculation arose that Ashley might be among them. She was not. No evidence has ever connected Castro to Ashley's disappearance. The hope that Castro's arrest would solve Ashley's case evaporated within hours. Investigators turned their attention to Kevin Donathan. In 2019, police searched his home. On February 25, 2020, he was sentenced to 35 years in prison for offenses against multiple minors over a 25-year period. He has not been formally named as a suspect in Ashley's case, but investigators have stated he has not been excluded either. The man who broke her phone on the day she vanished, leaving her unable to call for help, is now serving decades for a pattern of predatory behavior. In April of 2021, the FBI excavated land at West 43rd Street and Train Avenue based on a tip that had been called in anonymously. Bones were unearthed from the site and sent for analysis. The results came back. The remains were determined to be animal bones, not human. Another lead that generated hope and delivered nothing. The FBI updated its information based on continued investigation, stating that Ashley was likely last seen on July 8, 2007, near West 44th Street and Trowbridge Avenue, slightly adjusting the timeline from earlier reports. In August of 2007, just weeks after her disappearance, Ashley's family received a phone call from a blocked number. A girl's voice said, "It is me, Mom. I am okay. Do not worry." Then she hung up. The call could not be traced. It remains the last possible communication from Ashley Summers. Nobody knows if it was really her or if someone else made the call. FBI Special Agent Kristen McCaskill stated in 2025, "We believe there is an individual out there who has information that could break this whole thing open." Ashley Summers disappeared from a city where 3 other women were being held captive in a basement just blocks away. She was classified as a runaway because she moved between family homes. Her phone was broken by a relative who is now in prison for decades of predatory crimes. She called her family once and said she was okay. Then silence. Cleveland's West Side has given up some of its secrets, but not this one. Who is the individual the FBI believes holds the key? Ashley called home once and then went silent. The next case takes us to a county fair in Oregon, where a boy was seen being forced away by a man, and the prime suspect took the answer with him to the grave. Jeremy Bright. On August 14, 1986, Jeremy Dolan Bright attended the Coos County Fair in Myrtle Point, Oregon, with his sister. It was the highlight of summer in a small logging town. The fair drew people from all over the county. Jeremy was a popular student, an honor roll achiever, and a star basketball player who was looking forward to starting high school in the fall. He and his sister separated at the fair around 2 in the afternoon. They made a plan to meet back at the Ferris wheel at 5. Jeremy never appeared at the meeting point. His sister waited. He did not come. Multiple witnesses, including his sister, reported seeing him being forcibly taken by a man near the Ferris wheel between 1 and 1:30 that afternoon. His sister also reported seeing him leave with two men she did not recognize. Jeremy Dolan Bright was born May 25, 1972, in Baltimore, Maryland. He had dark brown hair, green eyes, stood 6 feet tall, weighed 140 pounds, and wore size 13 shoes. He had a broken left index finger at the time of his disappearance. He lived in Myrtle Point with his mother Diane, stepfather Orville Gulseth, known as Ole, and his sister. His parents had separated in the fall of 1985, and Diane had moved with the children 100 miles away to Grants Pass. Jeremy and his sister were staying with Ole to attend the fair. The day before the fair, on August 13th, Jeremy called his mother around 4:45 in the afternoon, telling her he was having a great time. That evening at 9:40, he visited his grandmother's tavern, got money from Ole, and was last seen by family members. The next day at the fair, he and his sister split up at 2 in the afternoon. By 5, he was gone. What happened that night was deeply disturbing. A woman named Cecilia Fish encountered an unnamed male resident of a local apartment building who stumbled through the entryway, completely covered in blood. When she asked him what happened, he laughed and said, "Oh, this happened hours ago." Half an hour later, Jeremy's friend, Johnny Fish, arrived at the same building overwrought and terrified and told Cecilia to stay away from the windows. Nobody has ever explained what happened in that building that night. The prime suspect was Terry Lee Steinhoff, a local man who had babysat Jeremy during his childhood. Jeremy was reportedly last seen in Steinhoff's truck on the evening he disappeared. Steinhoff reportedly told a relative, if they want to find Jeremy, they should look up there, while driving toward Roseburg. 1 week after the case aired on Unsolved Mysteries in January of 1989, Steinhoff was charged with the stabbing of 32-year-old Patricia Morris. He pleaded guilty and was sentenced to life in prison. He passed away behind bars in 2007 from a heroin overdose, without ever confessing about Jeremy. Theories about what happened to Jeremy center on 3 or 4 young men from Myrtle Point, who appear in every version of the local rumors. Some believe Jeremy accidentally overdosed at a party. Others believe he was accidentally shot at a swimming hole. Still others believe he was taken from the fair by force, which is what the eyewitness accounts suggest. Sheriff Craig Zani offered letters from the DA promising to reduce sentences by 10 years for anyone who came forward with information. Nobody did. The case was featured on That Oregon Life in January of 2026, bringing renewed attention to a case that Myrtle Point has kept quiet about for nearly 4 decades. Jeremy Bright went to a county fair with his sister on a summer afternoon. He was seen being forced away by a man. A person showed up at an apartment building covered in blood and laughed about it. The prime suspect told a relative where to look and then went to prison for a separate crime where he took the truth with him when he passed. A small town in Oregon knows what happened to Jeremy Bright. The sheriff believes it. The investigators believe it. But nobody is talking. What are they protecting? Jeremy's town keeps its silence. But the final case on this list involves a girl who left for school one morning and never arrived, and the school never called to say she was absent. Tammy Belanger. On the morning of November 13th, 1984, in Exeter, New Hampshire, Patricia Belanger watched her daughter Tammy Lynn walk out the front door of their home on River Street and head toward school. It was a cloudy, chilly fall morning. Lincoln Street School was approximately 1 mile away. A neighbor named Betty saw Tammy skipping across Court Street at around the same time, heading in the direction of the school. Those are the last confirmed sightings of Tammy Lynn Belanger. Tammy never arrived at Lincoln Street School. But here is the detail that made this case even more devastating. The school did not call to report her absence. Lincoln Street School did not have a policy of proactively verifying student absences by calling parents. Tammy's empty desk went unflagged all day. No teacher called home. No administrator followed up. When Tammy had not returned by 3:30 that afternoon, Patricia called the school and was horrified to learn her daughter had never been in class. She called police immediately. An entire school day had passed. Roughly 7 hours of critical time had been lost. Tammy Lynn Belanger was born February 24, 1976, in Exeter, New Hampshire. She had brown hair and brown eyes. She was a student at Lincoln Street School. She was walking a route she had walked many times before, through a small New England town where everyone assumed their children were safe. The response once police were notified was massive. Officers from neighboring towns, the fire department, Coast Guard, helicopters, boats, and hundreds of volunteers searched 6 to 8 square miles around Exeter. Over 1,000 tips poured in during the first 2 days alone. A nearby flooded quarry was searched by divers. Nothing was found. No clothing, no backpack, no trace of Tammy anywhere along her route to school or anywhere else. By November 20th, just 1 week later, the Exeter police chief said publicly that he had little hope of finding Tammy alive. Within 3 days, investigators zeroed in on a suspect. Victor George Wanyetier Jr. was a convicted offender who had been paroled in July of 1983 after serving time for a serious offense involving his stepdaughter. He was employed at Brad's Custom Auto Body on Main Street in Exeter, a business located just several blocks from Tammy's walking route to school. On the morning of November 13th, 1984, the very morning Tammy vanished, Wanyetier called in sick to work. He was not at the shop. He was somewhere else. His blue 1965 Ford matched a suspicious vehicle that a witness reported seeing near the school that same morning. When police searched his home, they found something that sent chills through the investigation: a photograph of Tammy. He was jailed on a parole violation in December of 1984. Years later, more evidence surfaced. In 1991, Wanyetier was arrested in West Palm Beach, Florida, for targeting young girls through their bedroom windows. During his Florida trial, prison inmates testified that Wanyetier had confessed to them about Tammy and about another missing girl named Christy Luna from Green Acres, Florida, who had vanished in May of 1984 when Wanyetier was living near her home. He reportedly admitted this to 11 or 12 separate inmates. He received a 75-year sentence as a habitual offender. Despite the confessions, no physical evidence directly connected him to either disappearance. He was never formally charged in Tammy's case. He passed away in December of 2012 at the age of 69. When Patricia was informed, she responded, "I am glad he is gone." Tammy's case led to sweeping changes across New Hampshire. Schools began proactively calling parents when the students were marked absent, a policy that did not exist before Tammy vanished. Lead investigator James Valakay called it the case that haunts him most in nearly 50 years of law enforcement. He said, "I think we came very close." Tammy Lynn Belanger left her house on a November morning and walked toward school. A neighbor saw her skipping across the street. Somewhere between Court Street and Lincoln Street School, roughly 1 mile of small-town New Hampshire road, she was taken. The school never called. The suspect called in sick that morning. He had her photograph in his house. He confessed to inmates, and he was never charged. What happened on that 1-mile walk, and would Tammy have been found if the school had simply picked up the phone? This was all from our side today. Thanks for watching. Click here to check out another video.